guys, how's it going? So it feels like a second Christmas to me because I just went down to the garden center and picked up a bunch of beautiful new houseplants that I'm so excited to show you. We're out here in the greenhouse. It definitely feels like spring because the high is only 48 today, which for this time of year for us is pretty high, but in the greenhouse it's typically at least 20 degrees warmer, so it'll get close to 70 degrees in here. That's why I've got them all out here so I can repot. I mean, you guys know how messy repotting can be. We'll repot out here, leave the mess out here before we take them inside. So all I want to do today is just show off these plants, talk about them briefly, just some basic care tips, and then repot. I've got all my supplies down here. So I think what we'll do first is just kind of walk through all of the new varieties that I got, and I'll show you all the supplies. First off, we've got this string of pearls, which I have other string of pearls in the house, but they're a lot smaller. I tend to get these, I pot them up when they're nice and big, and then I always tear them apart to use for smaller projects. I like this one in the stage of growth it's in right now because it'll be very easy to repot because it doesn't have a whole bunch of these hanging over the side yet. That just makes it a little bit more difficult, but I like the color of this. And I also love that these as a succulent don't need as high of light as most other succulents. You can get away with a medium light position, which is great. Right here is a Janet Craig Dracaena. I just thought this looked really fresh. And Dracaenas are such a wonderful, bulletproof houseplant. I have had a Dracaena in our house. I don't even remember what, I think it's a Warnecki star, if that's a thing. I've had it since Aaron and I lived in our very first apartment, which is over 11 years ago, and it's huge. It's grown really tall, and it just has hung in there and only been repotted one time since I bought it. So anyway, they're just a really nice one. Schefflera here. I don't think we've ever done a specific care guide on Schefflera, but they're just such an easy to find, easy to care for houseplant. They like highlight, but I just think that they've got a really unique leaf structure. I think they are native to Australia, and I think in their native environment they get quite big. We've also got a bromeliad right here, which is a really interesting, this one I bought, it's after its bloom. You can see this is the mother plant right here, which I'll talk about a little bit more in depth, and we've got a pup coming off the side. But this is also called a silver vase plant or an urn plant, I believe. Acmea is the type. I don't know a ton about bromeliads, enough to keep them alive and looking good usually, but I haven't, delved into all the different varieties that are out there. I haven't had up to this point a really humid, nice spot for bromeliads, but this specific variety tends to do okay in our dry climate. Then I've got a bunch of African violets, which I walked past them and I just thought I need one in every single color because they almost have a primrose look to them. And so they just give me all the spring feels just looking at all of these. I kind of grouped them here on the table. I've got some single bloom varieties. So we've got kind of a darker pink right here, beautiful blooms. We've got a really soft, delicate pink here. And then we'll just skip right over to this one because this is kind of the medium pink variety and there's a lot of buds. Look at all these buds. And then right here we've got the classic deep violet color. Love this. And I do have African violets in my house and I think they're all about this color right here. This one's beautiful. This has got the violet with the white margin, which just gives it a really interesting look. This one also has a lot of buds on it, ready to bloom. And then right here I've got 4 varieties that are all double, which I am a huge sucker for double blooming flowers. I just love them. They look fluffy and just lush to me. So we've got this kind of periwinkle blue color, which out of all of the doubles I think is my favorite. Then we've got all the rest of them are kind of in the orchid pink family. This is an orchid pink double with a white margin and kind of white underside. So you can see the underside of the bloom here. It's kind of like a light pink-ish white. And then we've got a double orchid with kind of spotted petals. Can you see that detail? So pretty. And then this is just a clear orchid pink double right there. And then the very last houseplant I picked up was a fiddle leaf fig, which I have one in the house. It's a tree form. This is definitely not a tree form. I could train it into that if that's what I wanted to do, but I think I want this to be more of a shrub looking plant. And I feel really confident in sharing some care tips on these because the last time we did a fiddle leaf kind of care guide, I told you guys that I had just recently acquired mine. I had taken care of them down at the garden center a lot, but not for any extended period of time because they fly out the door so fast. But now I have over a year under my belt of taking care of my fiddle leaf fig tree and it's done so well. So anyway, I was confident to spring for a second one for our house. I wanted to wait because they're not cheap plants. I wanted to wait to make sure I really had the care down. And then let me show you all the stuff. I'm going to be using like all the different kinds of soil today and fertilizers. So I've got the regular potting mix here, Espoma Organic. I've got over here, and sorry the sun is shining right on it, we've got African Violet potting mix. There's some cactus mix for our string of pearls, orchid mix for our bromeliad. I've got some, this is called mood moss. Let me move it into the shade. Whew. Let me actually, I'll be top dressing some of the pots, probably not the African Violet, but the rest of them with this moss. Look how pretty that is. And then I've got a selection of containers down here. I've got mostly terracotta for my African Violets. I picked these up at the garden center while I was down there. I've been eyeballing these. They're a quilted ceramic and I think they're really pretty. They've got a built-in saucer. I've got a couple of really gorgeous, these are from Unique Stone and I love the patina that they have taken on, little concrete pots, and some other random supplies. So I've got my trowel and my cactus fertilizer, violet fertilizer, orchid fertilizer. So I've got everything gathered. What I want to do now is just clear the table of everything but one plant and then we'll just start in. So I'm going to start with this string of pearls first. I'm going to put it in this concrete container here and I'm using the cactus mix, which I don't put anything at the bottom of any of these containers for any kind of drainage. I never do. No gravel, no bark, nothing like that, because it actually causes more harm than it does good for your plant. And I've gone into that several different times in videos, but you can see I put a layer of soil down on the bottom, I think just enough to catch this whole container. I'm kind of expecting this not to be very rooted just because the plant isn't very big yet, but I'm just going to gently remove the little hangers here. These are not as hard to repot as like the donkey's tail sedum. Oh my goodness, those are hard to repot without wrecking everything. So I'm just going to gently squeeze the container and hopefully it releases. There it comes. Yeah, it's rooted all the way to the bottom. It's not really heavily rooted though. Like I could rough some of the soil out, but I don't think I need to. Yeah, I think this is just perfect. Into the container here. Oh yeah, that's gonna be perfect. I do notice that I need to put a little bit around the root ball, so I'll do that really fast. Sometimes if you've got like a much bigger pot, you can kind of shove some soil up around the sides to kind of create a well inside, and then you don't have to add as much soil. But this one was just so close, and cactus soil honestly is really hard to make stick to the sides of containers because it's so like gritty and there's sand in it, so it wants to fall right back down in the pot. So this just takes a second. So I think that that looks really good, and it'll just kind of mound up a little bit more and start spilling over the edge, which I do think I'm going to have this one up on a little pillar so it'll have a lot of distance it can cover once it starts to grow. I do have a care guide video of this already, so we'll try to remember to link it down below, but just basics are that it likes bright indirect light to medium light. It doesn't need as bright of light as a lot of your other succulents need. I do find that I have to water mine a little bit more often to keep them happy. It could be just because I live in a very dry climate. So I check mine about once a week and maybe even give it a little bit of water. Typically I don't see any water come out the bottom, so I water them pretty light. Anyway, they like fairly warm temperatures, so they like the temperatures inside of our house. Next is the beautiful Schefflera, which I'm going to put in my new gray ceramic container. I'm using regular potting soil for this one. They actually prefer to stay consistently moist, and if they don't stay moist, their leaves will start to yellow and drop off. Typically, when you start noticing that, you can up the amount of moisture and it will rebound and start growing again, but that's something that I had to learn throughout the years. I always thought that I was keeping mine too wet, and that's why they started to yellow and drop off. They don't like to be soggy though. You don't want to keep them like a bog plant, but you just want to keep them evenly, kind of like a lightly damp consistency, and they like a lot of bright light. There's nothing super interesting about the potting process here, so I will get it done and then we'll come back and show you what it looks like. So I'm putting some mood moss as a top dress on this one because while it does make it look really pretty, I think it will also help with some moisture retention. So I typically like to do that on all my containers that kind of call for it. Of course, the string of pearls, there's no real soil surface to speak of, so I skipped it on that one. That looks really pretty. Look at that. It looks gorgeous in this container. I think that's its good side right there. I'm going to pot up Janet Craig next because it's a fairly similar process to the Schefflera. I'm going to be using the regular potting mix, another concrete container. I'll be top dressing with moss. Here we go. So this one had a really good root system down here at the bottom. In fact, it was a little bit more compact when I got it out of its container. So I did fluff it out just a little bit. Wanted to make sure you guys saw that. I love how this one turned out with the moss. It just is so clean and peaceful and simple looking, which kind of personifies New Year to me. And I think just having the non-variegated foliage, just this clear, glossy, deep green, just looks so clean to me. And Dracaenas are such an easy plant. If you are a beginner, this is a great one to start with because they can handle quite a bit of neglect and still like you. Like the one I have inside is kind of in medium-ish light. I've had it for over 11 years, like I said, and only repotted it once. It gets water maybe every 2 weeks. I would probably keep yours on a once-a-week schedule, just checking it. I try to do that with all of my plants, but sometimes it's not just a realistic thing. I sometimes run out of time. So I like to have plants like this that can handle that. But I would say for light, medium to bright indirect light, and then just moderate water. So next I'm going to plant up my fiddle leaf fig. I do have my container ready. I'm using terracotta because that's what I used on my last one that's doing so well. I already have some regular potting mix down in the container. You can kind of see that I've made a little bit of a well and kind of pressed some soil up around the sides. And then I'm going to be top dressing with moss again. But I want to pull this out of the container so we can all take a look at the roots and see how they look without breaking a leaf, hopefully. So they look pretty good. Little bit bound down here, so I'm just going to do just a light. I doubt this is even necessary to do this. It's not as necessary as you think to break up root memory unless it's severe. It really doesn't make a difference. Roots are so resilient, and it's kind of like they know what to do. Okay, now I'm going to pot it up and then I'll show you what it looks like in the end. I am so excited about having this plant. I've got a perfect location for it. So let me tell you about how I've taken care of mine inside. I give mine water every single week. In fact, we moved it from our front sun porch, which is where we had it, into the house, into an area that I'm at more because then I could remember to water it. So I just give it a little bit of water once a week. I just barely see a tiny bit of water sometimes come out of the bottom. I don't water it super heavy. So I know there are some people who like to water it really heavy to where there's quite a bunch of water that comes out the bottom, and then they do it less often, like maybe every couple of weeks. I tend to like to do a little bit less and do it a little bit more often because it keeps me on a little bit more of a consistent habitual schedule. I've got mine in a window that it's in a southeastern facing window, so it gets morning sun, a block of morning sun, and then some filtered sun because there's a tree outside in the afternoon. So it gets quite a lot of light, and I think that's what has made it stay really nice, and it hasn't gotten really too like gangly. I have one stem that's pretty long that I am going to probably be cutting back here soon, but it has stayed nice and full. The leaves look really good. It's producing new leaves. I do dust mine every once in a while, so like this one, when I get it inside, I'll probably just take a damp cloth and just gently wipe off the tops. I always support the leaf with my hand on the underside because it's very easy to pop the leaves off on accident. So anyway, that's how I have found success with mine thus far. So next up are my African violets. I'm just going to pot up 3 of them for you in the video today because it's the same for all of them. So this is my herb growing windowsill kit from Gardener's Supply. I haven't started my herbs yet, as you can see. And I was kind of looking at it thinking, ooh, I think it would be really pretty to utilize 3 of these pots. Like I'll take 2 of them out because these plants are so big, and I'll space 3 of them in this little saucer and put them on my kitchen windowsill, and it'll be just perfect. And I like this galvanized look. They do have removable bottoms so that the pots will have drainage, but they're a little bit, there we go. You kind of want them to be tough to get out. I'm just going to use my African violet potting mix, and I'm not going to have to add very much. So on this one, as with all the other plants I've potted up today, I made sure not to bump up in too big of a container. You usually want to go like 1 pot size bigger. With African violets, it's kind of a rule of thumb to go about 1/3 the size in inches the diameter of the plant. So if you have like a 12-inch diameter plant, you do a 4-inch size pot. So I'm really not going to be bumping these up much. I mean, we'll have a little bit more root growth at the bottom, and that'll be pretty perfect for a while. They tend to bloom better if they're a little bit root bound. This one has quite a bit more room to grow. You can see a bunch of soil right in here that doesn't have roots yet. It's not bound on the bottom, but healthy looking root structure there. These will slide down really easy into these containers. I didn't mention on the other containers, you probably want to leave a pretty decent sized lip for watering. So like at least an inch or so. So when you water doesn't like, you know, come over the sides of the container. With African violets, I still leave a little bit of a lip, but it's not as necessary because you want to water these from underneath, which makes this saucer perfect. I can put water in the bottom. The African violets can suck up whatever water they need, and then I can remove them and pour out any remaining water so they don't sit in it. That's why the lip isn't as important on these. This soil, it's got that peat humus and peat moss, and it's so spongy, it just sucks the water up into the container like kind of like a sponge. And they do much better with water that way. Water actually damages the leaves of the African violets. And these will want a kind of bright indirect light spot as well. No direct sun on these because it will burn their foliage, but they do need bright enough light in order to perform well, in order for you to get repeat blooms. So let me finish this up really quick. They fit this container perfectly. Had I done 5, I think it would have been way too crowded, but I think they'll be very happy together like this for quite some time. They'll be happy in these containers and with the amount of light that they're getting in our kitchen windowsill. In terms of fertilizing, usually I fertilize every 2 to 3 weeks or so, spring through fall, so I won't have to worry about doing that for a little while yet. And I use an African violet specific plant food for that. Okay, the last plant I have is the bromeliad. This is a really beautiful looking plant just with its leaves. Like it did have a bloom spike in here, and that's something I kind of want to talk about, but the white kind of silver variegation on top of the green is just very eye-catching. So now this one is the mother plant right here. It had the bloom stalk here, which they usually last for like 3 to 4 months. They bloom for a really long time. But the thing about it is once it blooms and it's done, you remove the bloom stalk, which has been done. It was removed down in here, and then the mother plant will slowly start to die. So if you see that, you may not want to pay maybe top dollar for a bromeliad that's already had its bloom stalk removed, because you know that this one, it can take a long time, like it can take a year or 2 for this whole plant to desiccate enough to where you want to remove it. But usually at this point is when they start pushing little babies. So these are pups right here. You can see this one. So you can do one of 2 things. You can leave this pup attached to the mother plant and let it kind of draw energy and things from that plant. And then once this one has finally desiccated and died back enough, you can remove the mother plant by just either twisting it off or cutting it off at the base, and then just let this one continue to grow. Or you can pop this out of the container and remove the pup now and pot it separately. I am going to just leave it connected because we'll be able to enjoy this plant for so much longer. And the fact that this one can gather nutrients from the mother plant, I think is the way to go. That's kind of how I want to approach it. Now these are watered very interestingly watered. So they're an epiphyte. They don't really gather any nutrients from the potting medium. It's basically there to anchor the plant. You may want to water the growing medium like every month or something. Just give it a good wash down, I guess. But you really water these plants from inside. So the vase or the urn, that's where it gets its name. It's got this little kind of water vessel inside that during the winter months, you just keep a little bit of water in there. You can see that. And that's what happens in nature. You know, it rains where these are native to in more tropical locations, and it fills up their little water tank, and that slowly feeds the plant. You do want to make sure to pour that out like once a month or so and put fresh water in, because that water can like gather up bacteria and stuff, and you don't want that, especially if you're treating it as an indoor plant. So it's not really getting water from the medium. They are very lightly rooted. In fact, let's take a look at the roots here. If I can get it out of here. Usually they don't have a super extensive root system. Yeah, you'll notice a lot of fluff, a lot of fluffy soil still in here, and those are just basically to anchor, not really for moisture or nutrients. When you fertilize these, which you don't have to do very often, you want to use a spray. So you could use an orchid or air plant type fertilizer in a diluted form in a spray bottle to spray the foliage, because that's what will soak in the nutrients. They don't soak it in from the potting medium. Like watering the potting medium with a fertilizer water won't do anything. So you can see there what the root system looks like. And we're going to be using our orchid bark to repot. So orchid mix is completely different than your traditional potting soil. You can see it's a mixture of bark, chunky bark, perlite, and charcoal. and it just helps facilitate water drainage so that nothing is holding on around the root system of this plant. And it's really good for orchids and epiphytes like bromeliads. So I'm just going to place this inside the container and then use the extra I've got to go around the outer portion of the root ball. The color of the leaves and the color of the pot, I think, complement each other so beautifully. And I know this is the mother plant. She's bloomed, she's on her way out, but she's so gorgeous still. I mean, no burn on the end of her leaves. A beautiful structure. I mean, like perfection in structure, that I want her to live out the rest of her days in a nice spot in our house for as long as she, you know, hangs out. And I don't know why I'm referring to her as a she, except that it is called the mother plant. And then we'll just let the pup grow, and it'll eventually kind of take over as this one starts to desiccate, and then I can repot and kind of position the pup to where, you know, it's going more upward rather than out. But I'm really happy with this one. So it's going to go in a bright indirect light sort of position inside the house, and I'll probably put it alongside some of the other ones that I potted up today. So anyway, that is the video today, guys. I just wanted to show these plants off because I'm so excited about them, and it's always so fun to start with fresh ones at the beginning of the year. Now, we have done care guides on the African violet and the fiddle leaf fig. I kind of want to update the fig care guide video though, and if you want to see care guides, like more details on any of these plants, let me know. We can always update guides that we've done before too. So anyway, I hope you guys have all had a really good start to the new year, and we will see you in the next video. Bye.